Just go over the economic impact, economic utility of multidisciplinary research, and how it helps research also. So we've got a great set of panelists. Not my first choice, this is the second set of choices I have for panelists. But still a pretty sharp crew. The moderator today is going to be Tom Parks, our Vice President of Research, and this is Tom here. Then following Tom will be Ted McAleer, who's the Executive Director of USTAR, the Utah Science, Technology, and Research Initiative. And kind of the flow is, Tom's going to talk about how the impact at the university level and economic level of this overall thing, and he'll moderate the panel. Ted's really been, the USTAR group's been responsible for recruiting excellent multidisciplinary faculty here to Utah. And then the third speaker will be Steve Stevens. Steve Stevens is the chair of radiology here at the university, a longtime friend, and SCI and other groups have collaborated with Steve to do interesting things in radiology using a variety of disciplines to actually work that data up and make a huge clinical impact. And then trying to take this crazy multidisciplinary stuff to industry, to commercial realization, is going to be represented by Dave Weinstein. Dave is a SCI alum. He's the CTO of Numera Biosciences, which was a company that bought a SCI spin-out that Dave spun out, Visual Influence. So he's been fighting in that trench of taking university research commercial. And then Bryan Ritchie, welcome to Utah, is our TCO Director, Associate Vice President of Technology Ventures, recently to Utah about a month ago. And he's going to tell you what we're doing here at the university and what technology transfer is all about. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tom. And gentlemen, thank you.
Sure. Well, welcome to everybody. I wanted to start with a remark about collaborative interdisciplinary research, which is what most of our technology commercialization efforts wind up being. And it's kind of a paradox that the university itself is not really set up, not organized to facilitate collaborative, multi-investigative, interdisciplinary research. Even though we all agree with what the philosopher of science Karl Popper wrote 50 years ago, that he said, we are not students of some subject matter, but students of problems. And problems may cut right across the borders of any subject matter or discipline. We recognize that in our teaching at universities. We have core courses for undergraduates. We offer our graduate students multidisciplinary courses like systems theory. We even recognize that we do integrated multidisciplinary curricula for our professional students. Medical school is nothing if not interdisciplinary education. We recognize when we're forced to that new fields coalesce out of different disciplines, so we recognize environmental sciences and neuroscience as fields. And we will occasionally allow an institute or a center like this one to spring up to do multidisciplinary research. But most of the basic building blocks of universities, most of our training, the way we organize our faculty into departments, the way we organize our journals, peer review of grants, the way we administer and give grants, all of those are still done along traditional disciplinary lines, which is really different from the way that industry or national labs organize research efforts, which are problem focused. And when the problems are solved or given up on, the resources are moved and shifted to a new problem. So in trying to make the university culture amenable to serve problem-oriented research, we have that fundamental tension between the way we're organized by disciplines and trying to be more problem-focused, which is what society now is sending a clear message that they want us to be. Utah has as much experience as almost any university in turning university research into products or commercializable technologies. And so we really ought to be able to solve this problem, meet this challenge. And I think we are meeting it in many ways, but it still remains a challenge for the university and for the industry groups that would like to work productively with the university. And we know we aren't, speaking for the university, I can say we know we're not entirely where we need to be in making it easy for industry to work with us, but we've moved a long way in that direction, and you'll hear from some of these folks about how this works at the University of Utah. Ted, you want to, are you leading
I think I am.
on? All right.
All right. Thank you. I'll slide up here and see if we can queue up my stuff.
And we're happy to have questions. We don't promise to
All right.
provide answers, but we'll take questions. Ted, you're fine with questions during?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Fire away.
Put that in slideshow mode.
You gonna hit it or? Got it. Okay. Good. Okay, we'll do the arrows on the keyboard. Is it gonna be this arrow? There we go. All right. So I figured I'd just take about 5 minutes to give folks a sense of what we're trying to do relative to interdisciplinary research through a program that was funded 5 years ago called USTAR. And for a short history lesson, I know a lot of the faces in the room, so I'm going to keep this real short, but about 5 or 6 years ago, a group of industry folks got together with the executive branch and the legislative branch and said, you know, we can do more in Utah to drive interdisciplinary research and commercialization. We can get the University of Utah and Utah State to better talk together, and inside each of those universities we can find the teams that really want to drive this approach that Tom just talked about. So USTAR was created to essentially with 3 programmatic elements. Number one, we said let's go out and recruit STAR faculty into these research teams, people that have this notion of interdisciplinaryness and people that have an entrepreneurial ethic and want to see their innovations make it to market. And then we said if we're going to recruit those folks, they're going to ask 2 questions. Number one, they're going to say, who am I going to work with? Who are the other stars that are already at the University of Utah or Utah State? And then, where am I going to work? And so to answer the question of where am I going to work, we decided to put some money into the infrastructure, and across the street from here is the USTAR building. If you have a chance to take a 30-minute detour today while you're at SCIx, I encourage you to go take a look at what we've got there, and I'll just show you one slide to whet your appetite for that. And then we knew that we had a great commercialization office here at University of Utah and Utah State, but we said, how do we engage industry in the 4 corners of the state? And so we came up with this notion for the technology outreach team, which would go out and try to act as brokers. And so I'm going to just give you a real quick snapshot of where we are. Since I'm at an imaging facility today, I should have put imaging in the center of the slide as opposed to nanotechnology, but Dick Norman saw this last week at Nano Utah, and so I just took my same slides from Nano Utah, so I'm going to make a couple of apologies as we go along. But the thing I like about having nanotechnology in the middle is, regardless of what discipline you're in, you know, fundamentally, the better that we understand materials at the nano level, the better it drives research in all these other areas. So I really do like to have nanotechnology in the middle, and these are the other innovation areas. One of the things that you do to drive interdisciplinary research is you get people from around the country, and so we brought folks in from a lot of different places around the country and proven that if you build it, they will come. And then you have to answer the question of where they're going to work, and so we've put together the USTAR building, which you can see in the upper left. That's what it looks like looking down from the Moran Eye Center, and this is what it looked like in the architectural renderings. And this is one of our core facilities, the nanofabrication facility. So we did make a smart decision in saying, hey, the Scientific Computing Institute is here. We don't need to move that across the street, but how do we create a new center that's going to bring together College of Science, College of Medicine, College of Engineering? And so a lot of people say to me, well, how is that working? Well, this is what we've got so far. This is what 35 USTAR professors have brought in terms of departmental affiliations. And as I look at this chart, what I try to do, obviously I was doing some reformatting and screwed it up, but in the middle I try to put the $130 million facility, and then I try to say we're bringing together 3 interdisciplinary institutes, one of which is the Scientific Computing Institute, where we're housed today, one is the Nano Institute of Utah, and then one is the Brain Institute. Each of those organizations has their executive leadership, and then inside of the $130 million building, we're building a microscopy, a nanofab, and a vivarium. Again, core facilities to drive that interdisciplinary research. And so far today, if you'll excuse the poor formatting, roughly 50% of the hires have been in engineering, about 8% in psychiatry, about 15% in psychiatry, 8% in College of Medicine, 15% in College of Science, and then the rest are from some other part of the institution. But that's kind of what we're trying to put together in terms of an institute of institutes for interdisciplinary innovation. And because I knew that my friends from Utah State would be in the audience, I want to make sure I remind folks that we're doing the same thing up north and out east. And so if you have a chance to get to Logan, that is the center that's working now in Logan. $60 million, $70 million worth of facilities up in Logan. And then we've had a chance to do a joint venture with our friends in Vernal, mostly private investment out there, but this is the Bingham Entrepreneurship and Energy Research Center, which is driving work around the Uinta Basin. And we put in place some other infrastructure there. And then, people kind of want to know where we're headed in terms of results. This is our results chart. The June 30th actuals show that we'd originally hoped to have $130 million of investment by this point in time from the state, but budgets being what they are, we've been very pleased to have $73.5 million worth of investment. We thought we'd be recruiting 14 teams by now. We're at 44 faculty. We thought that those 14 teams would have brought in $44 million of external research. They've actually brought in $67.9 million worth of external research to date. We didn't have a category for the research that's on the books that isn't expensed yet, so we tossed that into its own column. So in reality, we've won over $90 million worth of research, but this is on the books for fiscal year 13 and beyond. We thought that we were going to have about 69 invention disclosures by now, and we're up to 121. Really didn't have a way to figure how many patents we were going to be driving, but this is the piece that I'm excited about right here, to Tom's point. That's kind of the technology value chain, and this is what we're all about. How do we take those invention disclosures out into the market? And what I've stopped doing is talking about startup companies, but talking about commercialization projects that are interdisciplinary in their very nature, and which may end up in a startup company, or it may end up as a license to, a Merit Medical or a BlackRock Microsystems or something else. So I'll stop there. I actually had a little case study on nanotechnology, but I think I'm out of time, and if we've got more time, I'll come back to it. I just want to give you a little taste for how we're thinking about at the state level, creating this collaboration between University of Utah, Utah State, the regional higher education institutions, and hopefully using these higher education institutions as catalysts to drive that partnership with industry. So if we have more time, we can come back to some of those thoughts.
So I'm going to take a totally different tack, or questions. Yeah.
One of the goals of USTAR was, of course, commercialization, and one of those goals is actually more sort of boots on the ground, people actually working in new industry. That was a column that you didn't have on your slide. Do you have a sense if we're making progress in that area, new hires, new jobs, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, that's a number that sometimes falls off the chart because it's the toughest one to get our arms around, frankly, and I like to really be precise with the data that I'm 100% positive of. We're somewhere between about 2,000 and 2,500 jobs that have been incented out of the USTAR programs. One of the ways that we think about that is, national metrics say that for every $1 million worth of research funding, you're going to create about 20 jobs. We also know that we created over 850 jobs in the construction element. We were very fortunate to actually have two massive projects going on during a recession, and so we were able to, employ, as I say, over 850 construction workers between the Utah State project and the University of Utah project. And then through our various technology commercialization programs around the state, we've had several hundred, if not up to about 500 worth of new jobs created out of that. So that's the slowest piece to come online. But what we're excited about is that the value chain is working the way we hoped it would work, and the collaboration is working the way we hoped it would work. And in fact, I was just meeting with a guy at lunch who folks to join us in our energy cluster. And I see Ned here. I even hinted to the guy that perhaps we can form the first joint faculty member between University of Utah and Utah State, because this person actually wants to do a lot of work out in the Uinta Basin with the oil shale. And I think that would be just, phenomenal to get our first guy in, first person in here to connect those two institutions together.
So I'm going to take a different approach. We've heard the top-down approach. This is what it's like in the trenches working back up. So it's going to be perhaps a little bit different. Already heard Dr. Parks talk about what the interdisciplinary research should be. I like this definition as we cross barriers and frontiers to get to new disciplines. And I think that also goes to your comment about crossing universities. How do we do that? How do we break down those kinds of barriers to be able to get to that point?
Other keyboard.
Okay. So from the bottom up, what are the characteristics that we look for people who want to do the interdisciplinary type of research? So it's kind of interesting going through this. Some of it makes sense, and some of it seems maybe counterintuitive. First is the academic rank. All those who think that those who are starting out as the instructor and the assistant professor level make better interdisciplinary researchers, or those who are at the professor level. And assistant professors, full professors. Okay? So it's the full professors that win, even though it didn't win in the count here. It turns out that if you think about this a little bit, that people who have been around long enough actually begin to make all of these interactions and have a lot of contacts throughout the system. And it also turns out sometimes that full professors have been at different institutions and bring different viewpoints as opposed to people who are starting in a single institution and don't have any other reference point to be able to do that. Personality. We're familiar with personality disorders, certainly. About 10% of the people that we deal with are somewhat toxic. But what kind of personality is it that we're looking for to be able to be really good, interactive, interdisciplinary type researchers? So there's this whole range of global inventiveness, going from the adaptive to the innovative. So going from the adaptive, those are the people who are in very confined disciplines, very confined kind of environments, as opposed to those who are not. And so those who are in the defined environments are the ones that tend to be more adaptive, very narrow thought processes, like a lot of structure. Those who are more innovative, like the more open type environment across a lot of disciplines, as you might guess. But sometimes it can also be difficult to put it in that perspective, in that they don't have any real authority or have any respect for authority. It's something that they want to cross and be as broad as they can. Male versus female. Those who think male are better in this type of environment as opposed to female. Male?
Never thought about that.
Pardon? Those who think female. Yes, of course.
Those who don't think it's either.
So there are people who have said that. There's some research that says it doesn't matter. I go back, I don't know how many of you have ever seen Defending the Caveman. It's a one-man, one-act play about gender and gender types. So males tend to be hunters. We go to stores, get our shirt, and get out of there. Women go to the store and say, oh, pretty things, and gather people around them. And so I think if you look at some of the research that's been done, is that sometimes the females are much more interactive and interdisciplinary than the males are. And certainly, last but not least, those who come from different disciplines, those who are in the very defined sciences, the physics, the mathematics, those people tend to be more narrow in their scope, really like where they're working and don't reach out to others, as opposed to those perhaps in the health sciences who have more of a strategic approach on how do we take care of patients, how do we cross-collaborate. And there's no way for us to know all of the things that there are to know. So we tend to be perhaps a little bit more collaborative than others. What are the barriers? We've heard some of that already. One is intellectual property. Who gets intellectual property when you have this interdisciplinary approach? Sometimes that can be difficult. We create silos. As Dr. Parks was saying, sometimes those occur, and it's hard to break out of those in order to be able to participate and be responsible for the intellectual property. The indirect returns, again, from the silo side of things, sometimes it's very difficult to get the funding that we need or get the return on what we've done. Current, very much in news is that of conflict of interest. How do we do that? We've talked about business, we've talked about startup companies. How do we create, in a university setting, how do we get around this conflict of interest side? I think one of the things that's come out of this institution is a very well thought out approach to that. And I think that's what we benefit from our interdisciplinary group. Authorship recognition. Who gets the credit? It's very important in academic promotion. So we need to pay attention to that. Sometimes that can be very difficult for promotion as we look into the accomplishment of our individual faculty. What can we do to encourage? Again, we've already heard some of this. Seed grants, I think, are incredibly important for us to get some of the ideas and concepts into play and develop those. Collaboration with private foundations and industry. I think we are very fortunate at the University of Utah to be able to have these kinds of interactions and to foster. The interdisciplinary curricula, that's something I think we have an opportunity. Tom, you addressed part of that, but I still think we have opportunities there. The fellowships, how do we do that? I think, again, it's an extension of the curricula, but how do we do that and break down the barriers? And I think we've certainly seen the opportunity here. The service line approach from the health sciences part, we see that has been incredibly effective. We've been able to cross barriers in order to be able to take care of the entire line of disease processes. Stefan Pultz is here from the neurology side. We have this great neurosciences line, and I think we've done a very effective type of an approach with that, with neurosurgery, with radiology, and with neurology. I think one of the advantages that we've seen is the stroke service, for instance. We have one of the best stroke services throughout the entire North American continent. And then the most important of all is that of the mentorship, mentoring each other, mentoring our faculty. One of my colleagues once told me, said that we are all products of our experience and training. And I think that all comes back to the mentorship approach. So if we're successful, what happens? This is UCARE. Utah Center for Advanced Imaging Research came out of our department as an idea of bringing clinicians and researchers together. From that, we got some equipment and some funding from the Cumming Foundation, and then just continued to proliferate, both on the School of Medicine as well as on the main campus. And so be careful what you ask for. If you do it well, you may find yourself being distracted from what your core values are, and we have to be careful to be able to control that. If we bring in our business partners, for instance, we have a relationship with Siemens, then we start to see all of the things that we had before, but now we start to go towards specific developments of various technologies and the applications of those technologies and spin-off companies. So we've been working on a high-intensity focused ultrasound for a period of time, and that's been going on for 10 years. That's been a collaborative approach between engineering and radiology, looking at temperature displays from MRI to the point that we now have a very functional ability to be able to focus ultrasound energy and be able to destroy tumors. and then we take the applications from there in all of the other disciplines. So with that, I will stop and I'll entertain any questions. Bottom-up approach, top-down approach.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here today. As Greg said when he introduced us, I'm representing the entrepreneurial side in the sense that we spun out a small company from the SCI Institute, and it was successful, and we're still working on that now. We all love small businesses. The media loves them. The U.S. economy loves them. They're the backbone of our economy. They're the engines of economic growth. They're wonderful, except that it's exceedingly high risk, right? So these are not great numbers. This is a little bit scary. And many books have been written about how to make sure that you're in the group that succeeds, that makes it out to 10 years. And many people smarter than me have expounded for hours on it. I'm not going to do that. What I can do is share my story. So I'll tell you a little bit about how we ended up where we are today and some of the lessons that we learned along the way. Okay, so I came out here to go to graduate school in 1993, and on my recruiting visit, I was trying to make the decision between coming here or going to University of Virginia to work with Randy Pausch on some computer graphics stuff. And I met this crazy young faculty guy, Chris Johnson, who had just had this centerfold in Discover magazine about bioelectricity in the body, and he was super excited about it. And I thought, I think I want to go do that. So I came out to Utah, and after a year of taking classes, started looking for a project, went and talked to Chris again, and he took me in as one of his students. And he had no money and he had no space, but he had a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of really good ideas. So myself and Chris and Rob McLeod, who I saw come in a second ago, hey Rob, and a couple of other grad students started this small research group, and we needed a name. So I named the SCI Institute, which was not the SCI Institute, it was the SCI Research Group at the time, designed our first logo, and we were off and running. In about 2002, we spun out our first company from SCI. And the idea behind that company was to take some of the high-performance visualization tools that we had developed and take them out to medical companies, this is the GEs and Siemens of the world, and get them to incorporate them into their tools. And Visual Influence version 1 did not make it. So there were some lessons in that. About 2 years later, Greg Jones had joined the SCI Institute as associate director. He was working on his MBA at the time. He dusted off the business plan, and he and I refined it a little bit, and we took a crack at Visual Influence version 2. And Visual Influence version 2 did succeed, so we got that one off the ground. We were really a consulting ware shop, so we had some space downtown, and we were writing software libraries for people who wanted to incorporate them into their products. And we were keeping our head above water, barely, sort of living project to project. We had the sense that we had really great technology. We just needed the killer app to sync it into, or a bunch of money so that we could go out and do that ourselves. And opportunity presented itself towards the end of 2006 to get acquired by another small startup, Numera Biosciences. And so we took that opportunity. And Numera Biosciences, who I'll talk about in the next couple of slides, was in the space of small animal imaging, so imaging of mice and rats, mostly for pharmaceutical companies. And so we took Visual Influence, myself and my team, and I came over as the Chief Technology Officer. So that's how I ended up at Numera. It's also the reason that a lot of what Numera does is very similar, but in the industrial space, to what happens here at SCI. Okay, so this is what Numera does. So technically, we're a contract research organization. As I said, we work primarily with big pharmaceutical companies. So if you peeked in and looked at their drug development pipeline, It starts as chemistry on whiteboards, makes its way into petri dishes where they're testing it out on small numbers of cells. Eventually, once they find a molecule, a drug that looks like it has potential, they will start injecting it into mice and rats, small animals, to test, to look at safety and efficacy. Does this do what we think it should do? Is it having any off-target effects that we don't want to see? Eventually, it makes its way into humans and hopefully becomes a blockbuster drug. So Numira plays in kind of the middle of that space. We play in the preclinical space where these companies are testing out these drugs on small animals, and they're sending them to us for imaging. So one way of looking at whether the drug is working, one way of looking at whether you're inhibiting cartilage damage or encouraging repair perhaps, is to sacrifice these animals, image them at very, very high resolution. This is like 6 microns per voxel. And then go in and play radiologist, right? We're scrolling through these imaging data sets, identifying the feature of interest, quantitating different things about them, writing up reports, sending them back to the pharmaceutical companies. So, so that's the space that we're in. But it's not the space that we thought we were going to be in. So when we started Numira, we thought that we were just going to be doing developmental biology stuff. Just looking at toxicology studies, making sure that there weren't any off-target effects due to these drugs. But it turned out that the staining methodology that we have that allows us to see soft tissue structures inside of CT, so this image looks a lot more like MRI than it does like CT, that's because of our metal-based stain. So because of that stain, because of the specimen prep protocols that we've come up with, it turns out there are lots and lots of different therapeutic areas that our company can now play in. So the company has been growing. Okay, so a few lessons from the front line. So what have I learned from this? There's a really big distance, oftentimes, between cool ideas and successful businesses. There's overlap, to be sure, right? You want to be right there. You don't always start out there. A lot of times you start out kind of here and try to make your way into that. There are people who have very successful businesses that have no cool ideas, right? There are lots of things that you can do and succeed, but there are also lots of cool ideas that don't make it. So why is that? Why is it that cool ideas don't always become successful businesses? Well, you have to think about the product. So if your product is not solving somebody's problem at a price that they're going to be willing to pay for it, and selling enough of them that you can build a business on it, it doesn't work. And furthermore, you can't just kind of have one idea, because you may start off here, like we did with developmental biology, and need to get here to just kind of make your way into that successful business space. So you have to have a big enough idea with enough flexibility that there's room for growth to kind of iterate a little bit. And really this comes down to sales and marketing. So if you're starting a company and you're a technologist and you know all about your particular scientific discipline, but you don't know anything about sales and you don't really interact with people who are going to be buying this, you're going to have a very, very difficult time. The people who do this well, the people who get out there and sell, the people who identify what market you should be in for you, those people are gold, and they're really hard to find and they're amazing to work with. This is the second lesson, is that as much as, so this panel is really about multidisciplinary science, different scientists working together. I've done that. Business is as multidisciplinary as any scientific thing that I've done before. You can't start a business successfully without having people on board who know about finance, who know about operations and setting up efficient protocols. You have to have a legal team. You have to have people there who can sign contracts, who can write contracts. Sales I already mentioned, and yes, you need people with domain-specific expertise. If you're going to do a neuroscience application, yes, you have to have neuroscientists, but you also need those other people. So this was one of the points from Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, which I recommend to everyone. He said, put the right people on the bus. So as you're getting started as a company, make sure that you have a really strong team, people who are flexible, people who you're going to enjoy working with. You're going to be spending a lot of time with these people, and it's not always going to go great. So, so put those right people on the bus. And some of those people need to help you make connections to investors. So eventually, if you're going to be a successful business, odds are you're going to need investment dollars. You had better have a really good business plan. So these people, some of them can help you with a business plan. A lot of that is going to come back to what problem are you solving and how much are you going to charge for it? Are you going to be in that space? And as you're putting people on the bus, make sure that some of them are coming with these connections into the investment community, because it's hard to go and do cold calls. We did a lot of that. So that's all I have to say today. Thanks.
Fantastic. It's great to be with you today. I'm excited for this opportunity. I think I'm still new enough I can play the new card in terms of perspective and in terms of what I'm seeing here. But let me just say how excited I am to be here and how great it is to be a part of everything that's going on here at the university. For those of you that don't know, I'm now running the Technology Commercialization Office here at the University of Utah. And we kind of heard the top down. I like this, kind of the top down and the bottom up. I'd say we're the ones that are drawing out of the middle and trying to make something happen with it, both directions. I think that from this panel's perspective, interdisciplinary research and commercially sponsored research, the partnership side, I'd really like to focus on the latter part of that in terms of the partnerships. How do we take what's done at the university, either collaboratively or individually, and do exactly what David's trying to do with his? So in some ways, I like his last slide. Those are a lot of the things we're trying to help people accomplish here. Let me just give you a quick outline. I'm just going to talk really quickly, but I'd like to talk about TCOs or TTOs, Technology Transfer Organizations or Commercialization Offices, universities and corporate partnerships, a little bit about our strategy and kind of the things that we see in the direction that we're headed. Some of the resources here that I think are different than I'm finding or have found at other universities, which I think give us great opportunities. And then a little bit at the end about the TCO ski partnership that is currently going that I think has great possibilities as well. Let me say, first of all, from my experience, most of the time, the office that I'm involved with is not really engaged with the research that's going on at the university in terms of the sponsorship, in terms of the partnerships. We're always interested in what's coming out of the university, but we've never really been interested in what's going into the university. That's usually handled by a different department. That's different here at the University of Utah, which I think is a very big positive, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit. There's a big disconnect. This causes a disconnect between what's government and private funded. And I would say this disconnect extends all the way to incentives for the researchers themselves. I've heard vice presidents of research say things like, if your research is funded by a peer-reviewed government grant, it's worth more to your career than if it's funded by an outside private organization. Those are interesting problems and dilemmas and get to some of the questions that were asked earlier in terms of, if I'm a professor, why is it that full professors collaborate better than assistant professors? Well, one answer is because they can. They're no longer in that promotion tenure pipeline that is dependent upon what kind of research and whether that's peer reviewed. That's a big issue. If you change those incentives, maybe more of the assistant professors say, happy to get on board that train. That differential perceived value internally causes problems as well in terms of the way the university values the output. So in other words, if all I care about is the publication, I don't really care about whether it gets into the public domain and is used, then that also provides incentives for the way that people respond to opportunities. I think that's important. The other reality is that many universities, in fact, I'll venture to say most universities, are just difficult partners. There's not a whole lot of people within these organizations that do have good business experience. They don't move at business speed, and that is a good thing. That's not pejorative. There are reasons why you shouldn't move at a quarterly reviewed pace. I get that. But at the same time, we don't have any real experience in valuing contributions, little experience in the capacity of de-risking or scale up. Oftentimes, this is the disconnect between the good ideas and the cool ideas and the businesses. They're just so early on. Right? What do we do when we have a great, cool idea, but really don't have the resources to de-risk it sufficiently that you can actually get it out to a place where a company can be started or an organization can pick it up? Finally, we're constrained, and especially from a public institution standpoint, there are just certain issues that make it difficult for us in terms of how we can invest, who can invest, what kind of conflicts of interest there are, just issues that we need to deal with. Now, that said, I think that there are key areas that we can approach, address, things we can do that can change these outcomes in some ways. Let me just talk about a couple that we're thinking about. One is that a lot of TTOs are, again, what can you disclose to me, and then what can I protect from an intellectual property standpoint? We're actually going to try to take a bigger picture view on this and say, we'd like to create partnerships with the people, the stakeholders, both internally with the faculty, externally with partners, corporations, organizations, and create win-win environments for both of those. So could we be more business and technology development experts? Could we help understand that, you know what this technology needs is not more technology de-risking, maybe it needs more business de-risking at this point. Maybe we need a better business plan, a better finance plan, instead of a better technology plan. Or maybe we've got a great business plan, we need better technology development. All of those are possible. But we need to see this holistically and not in very narrow terms. This partnership relationships, internally and externally, are also critical. It has to be that the faculty can trust what it is that we're doing. They can say, I believe that the commercialization office can help me get my ideas to market. I just came from a university as the first land grant university who had as part of its core value the idea that what we developed internally could be used and applied externally. I mean, you think about the whole the extension services, agricultural research extension, those kinds of things. I think we're in a new century in which that extension model in a high-tech way can be applied to almost anything. When you say, I'd like to take what we do inside the university and make sure it can be practically applied outside the university. I think finally we have to expand and change payoffs. The incentives that we give to faculty members and also to the organizations working to the universities have to change. And that's going to require some different thinking. So let me just give you a quick overview, and I'll just take 1 second on this slide. Part of the things that we're thinking about internally is that, and we've been criticized on some of these things in the past, well, are we just a shell startup company organization? No, while that's a necessary step, what we're really trying to do is drive value. And that value can be driven in lots of different ways. It might be by protecting the intellectual property, but it could be done in other ways as well. We're exploring those. Again, creating, broadening, deepening, clarifying, creating better quality relationships and connections with key stakeholders, and then making sure that we're driven in a goal-oriented format is something that we think is important. Let me talk about a couple of the resources that are inside our organization, and part of this will lead to the collaboration with SCI as well. We have a software development center that we run in collaboration with SCI. We have today 12 projects, 13 people working on different programs inside these projects, about $800,000 in sponsored research. The great thing about this is that it's a resource that whether internally as faculty or externally as startups or members of the community, you can come and get access to resources you need to develop your business. If I have a software component to any aspect of what I'm doing, I can come and work with us in order to get that done. It can be done very flexibly. It's not something I necessarily have to pay with hard dollars, and it's something that can help move my project forward. Similarly, we have a medical accelerator in which we're offering the opportunity to work with partners to do precision engineering and prototype, wet lab space, incubation. Again, in a flexible environment, one that isn't constrained by size or scale, but that can be sized and scaled. We have processes that are important, ways that you can come in with ideas and plug them into a process that can take them from cool idea to sustainable business. And we talk about 25 to 50% failure rate, and we get nervous about that, but it's not the failure that's the problem, it's when the failure happens that's the problem. You don't want to be failing after you've invested the $20 million, you want to be failing after you've invested $5,000, right? So that's the point here. We think we're going to churn through lots of good ideas that just are never going to be good business ideas or business outcomes. We just need to get through those more quickly. And we also have entrepreneurs in residence that help us to assess this management talent, resources, and application. Now, let me tell you what I think some of these opportunities are based on that. I think that if a technology transfer organization becomes a commercialization office, and you have the capacity to be the intermediary between the partner and the university, then you can buffer both of the visions and missions of those organizations when they're different. But if you can stand between those two things, you give the university an opportunity to pursue its core mission while also providing all the value it can to the stakeholders outside the university. At the same time, you allow companies to come use what's very good about the university, what's best about the university, their unfettered ability to sort of just explore, blue sky, and take what comes out of that makes sense for them and do something valuable. Here in Utah, which I think is a tremendous value, the TCO understands IP and how to structure these win-win deals. We're not perfect at this, by the way. We know that we've not done these perfectly, but I'll tell you, we're a hell of a lot better than almost any other place I've seen. And that's a big, big advantage. And yes, we're getting better, and we're committed to getting better and committed to learning about how to do this better, but those win-win partnerships provide us that opportunity. We have the opportunity to link these research projects with other intellectual property being developed both inside and outside the university. Here's where crossing disciplinary silos inside the university is important, but it's also important to take it outside the university and connect that with other things going on in other places, whether that's companies, foundations, or other universities. And there are lots of great examples about how this works. Jack tells a great story about a university that had a great dialysis technology, but didn't have a technology to deliver it, combined that with some non-exclusive intellectual property with HP, and what was it, a 50 million Series A round. I mean, this kind of ability to combine these intellectual property components together provide tremendous value. Finally, we have proven processes for de-risking and scale up. And even though we may only have capacity in a few areas, we're now learning how to link those with capacity in other areas, other universities, other companies that have that de-risking capability. So let me just kind of talk about one of these, which is the SCI partnership. Do you like the car we built here? Wow. Like that. Anyway, what we get here, lots of really cool research happening in SCI. We get disclosures that come to the commercialization office. Now what's really great is this partnership with the Software Development Center, which is also part of SCI. We can then work through commercialization processes. We can go through, try to scale up, de-risk, do additional code, add what needs to be done. We can do this, which then either creates partners or draws in partners. We then spin out technologies or bring in partners to help work on those technologies. And that goes back and forth. At some point, these partners become successful. Now what is are they thinking? And you can think about almost every one of these partners. They want to come back through the cycle again. So they come back to the Software Development Center and say, now let me promote or sponsor a project and work with SCI and the TCO to do something here, which then again provides intellectual property, and we start all over again. This then creates a virtuous cycle of growth and development through these processes. And again, with a multidisciplinary institute like SCI, you're drawing in whatever resources you need in order to get that job done, which is also important. I'll just throw this slide up quickly. This is a lot of what's going on. I sort of always use this slide just as an invitation to say there's so many places that everybody could get involved in this process that we would just say, we invite you to come pick a spot. Identify where you think you could come play in this process and come join with us in that partnership. That's what we're looking to try to accomplish. Thanks.
Well, we've got a few minutes for questions from the audience. Anybody want to toss some discussion points up for this?
I think one of the things I've seen most in my career is people will have really good ideas, but they sort of have taken the ideas into a great level of depth, and they think that idea might be commercial, and you can turn it into something that you can sell to somebody else. And I think the strategic trick is to back off and say, what are the fundamental tools in the idea? And how can those fundamental tools reach the absolutely broadest market? So peel away the super high, narrow, high technology stuff and say, how can I make a tool set that then I can either license or I can use in a vertical way that has a very broad market. And so I think one of the biggest mistakes that universities have in trying to exploit technology is they want to exploit all of it. In other words, here are all of my good ideas. I want to turn all of my good ideas into a product, and that's very problematic.
Some of the panels touched on, Dave and Bryan touched on those issues. You guys, anybody on the panel want to talk more about how to get those, the overlap of the two circles, cool idea and successful business?
Can just say one thing, I think this is the $50 gazillion question, right? Because what ends up happening for us is we patent everything, right? And then we're trying to manage all these patents, and we don't know what has value and what doesn't have value. And then you have the whole time constraint problem too, which is something might not be valuable today, but it might be valuable in the future. And you're sort of like, I just gotta hoard all of this stuff and just keep it all around me and, so the ability to do this evaluation early and quickly, and even if you're gonna say, hey, well, we'll do this in the least expensive way possible, put this on the shelf and wait, or just take this, just like you said, strip out the key components, that's tough. It's really hard work to do that. So, but agreed completely. You guys
Well, I
agree
think
with that?
SCI has a whole bunch of fundamental visualization tools.
Yeah.
And I think those are applicable across a huge number of product lines, from gaming to mapping to all kinds of things. And what you need to do is analyze where the biggest market is, not how cool the market is,
Sure.
where the biggest market is that can get you into that money successful business so that then you can attack the various other markets to make it happen.
Great.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that, that's the biggest challenge of it is, knowing enough about all those different other markets to say, oh, yeah, here's a cool idea, it would be best suited there. What ends up happening instead is that, you have kind of Brownian motion. Eventually, maybe you bump into that person over there and find that market where you should go. It seems like it's almost impossible to just stand up and look around and figure out where your idea would be best suited.
And I think Dave's point about how we're so enamored with the cool idea is one of the biggest stumbling blocks that most of the faculty have. Certainly that's why Visual Influence 1 went down, is because we were just so excited about the research and, boy, this is so cool. Why aren't you getting it? You're just not getting how cool this is. and we knew nothing about business. And so it went down, and it was this learning process all along the way.
I want to speak from a business perspective. As an entrepreneur, I have the design, I have seed money. How do I get involved with the process of getting involved? Is there some highlights of how I start this process to get involved?
How to get involved with the university and develop?
Yeah, to get with the SCI because what I need is I need interface with leaking managed research. I really can't afford to go through a bunch of cadaver needs to get the product to market. So I need some kind of visual, just cranking through iterations of things, simulations, prototypes, blah, 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 to get the final product to the market. Otherwise, it's just too really expensive to go through the research because it's not so complicated. It's just, and then my other concern, obviously, is non-disclosure agreements. Put time, effort, money, years into something. And I understand the university's standpoint, but also my standpoint, will SCI sign non-disclosure agreements about the stuff that I've already nailed down and feel like I own.
This is a great opportunity to work with SCI and the TCO, the Software Development Center, in that environment to have us help you get these things started. We're happy to sign NDAs. We're happy to work with you and partner with you and help you move that forward. That's precisely what we're focused on accomplishing.
Yeah, it would be,
There's a man right there to talk to. Wendy, these two guys right here at the end of the row, raise your hands right here. Yeah, James and Greg. Those are the two guys to talk to. Yeah, lots of folks you can help.
Zach will just give you a contract. You want to talk to me?
I like contracts.
Thank you. Sorry, for that.
Yeah, especially if I need who's the orthopedic contact would be, because I've had experience with UVM, University of Vermont, orthopedics, and then briefly with some folks here at the University of Utah years ago, and so now time's passed, now it's time to try to get this product to market to help.
We actually have a group doing some knee simulations,
Oh, you're
hip simulations. So yeah, we're the right place, I think. I'm guessing. And not only will we sign an NDA, we'll forget your ideas when we're done.
Okay.
Vic, did you have a question?
I don't know, it's sort of a comment, not a question. Every one of the speakers, almost every one of the speakers, raised the point that getting rid of the walls between disciplines is really the key to innovation and movement ahead. And the university people have known this for decades. But the university structure does not seem to be sympathetic with somehow getting rid of these walls. And I don't really see a way that this is possible. You know, the whole system we have put together of promotion, retention, and tenure really is a discipline-oriented sort of process. And the SCI Institute, I think, maybe is a step in the right direction. But I'd like to hear what Chris has to say about his thoughts. Is it really possible to get rid of the walls effectively? Even though we all know we should.
So it's a real challenge in the university system, and to go from those discipline specifics to bridge those in a more interdisciplinary way. And I actually think we need both. We need certainly discipline experts and from an educational point of view, but we need to make it much easier to cross the disciplines. And SCI has kind of been an experiment that has gone on at the University of Utah, and just like with the companies, we've failed in many ways to learn, to try again and do something better and better. And you know, as Dave mentioned, we started in the early 90s, and 94 is when we had the first named group. So it's been about 20 years to get to the point where we had our first SCIx to do this. And it's also really important to have the support from above, because you can't do it from just the bottom. I can tell you that. And so I think we're very fortunate at the University of Utah to have some of our senior leadership, in particular Vice President Dave Pershing, who has supported this kind of interdisciplinary model at SCI and at other places on campus, because without that, I think it would be even harder to do. And it's now starting to happen in other universities too. I've been asked to be on lots of advisory boards and consulting with what's funny is other bigger named, higher profile universities who haven't been able to figure this out. And they have someone from the little University of Utah come and talk with them about how to do this at their big name private university. And it's hard, but it's fundamental to the structures, and you've got to have both bottom-up interest in doing it and the top-down support from the very top.
I have a suggestion. All universities are built as a series of departments that have silos. And silos go after funding as silos. They say, I need a professor here, and I'm going to build up my silo. And the fundamental problem with that is that all of the funding of those silos goes against interdisciplinary exchange. So the way you fix that is you say, here's a piece of your department's money, and the only way you get it is to go interdisciplinary between departments. And I think at the university just did it. I mean, just said, look, you can do all the politics you want, but this is the way the funding's going to work. And if you don't do interdisciplinary things, you're not going to get the funding.
I think it's going to take a generation. It's taken 20 years, Chris, to get to this point.
Yep.
That's almost a generation, right? And so I think it's going to take probably another generation, maybe the half-life will get faster.
Well,
the idea of breaking down into kind of a new service line in the health sciences. So I use the example of neurosciences, but there's also the cardiovascular service line. We start to break down the lines within the surgical departments from medicine departments and from the imaging side. So it's really one of those things I think if you start to look at a broader picture, that's going to happen, but it also is going to take time and also producing new people who...
It's a cultural problem. And you can motivate cultural problems with money very successfully.
Although, you know, the other point to make on this though too is, and I think you hit the nail on the head, is this is a question of incentive, not structure. Structures change based on the incentives, and so you're proposing a different incentive structure.
Yes.
But then you have to ask yourself, why aren't they doing that now? Well, part of this is the prestige of the department, it's the vested interests of the people in those departments.
History,
It's
culture.
the history, it's the culture, but a lot of these are, well, do I really want to do interdisciplinary research? I mean, once you really say, I really want to, I'm incented to, the payoffs are right, I think the rest of that falls out probably pretty quickly and easily.
Just a point, when I've made some of these discussions before about the difference between the interdisciplinary nature and then the silos of the departments, and I had a department chairman correct me and said, oh, you mean cylinders of excellence?
Yes.
Keep that in mind.
Yes, sir.
I seem to see one thing as you were presenting this. You talked about professors tending to have more success than assistant professors and so forth. And I kind of attribute that they've made more mistakes than other people, so they know, and they learn from them, right? You also talked about the fact that a lot of businesses start out and they fail. Where have you factored into this whole model that you guys are talking about, the ability to fail, the ability to say that not everything we're going to try is going to work, and you've got to have that as part of your equation to learn from? Where do you fit that in?
You know, let me just say, that's something that scientists and engineers are actually really, really good at, failing, and then, because most of our ideas fail in our laboratories, and we back up and move over and try again. So actually scientists and engineers, and I'm not the only one who thinks this, there's a lot of people in the entrepreneurship area that think scientists and engineers make better entrepreneurs than MBAs do. So.
Well, that's definitely true.
I mean, I don't want to, if other people are already considered, if you want.
Well, and it's also nice when you can keep score over the macro system, right? I mean, when I put my green arrows up there, it shows that in the macro sense, we're doing very well, right? We're ahead of our targets. But, we struck out a bunch of times, and, we've got hit by pitch, and we've had our singles and our doubles, and we've had enough doubles and even a couple of triples that have gotten us to green arrows. But I think, in essence, everybody that you got up here on the panel today is the kind of person that likes failure, as long as it's fast failure and as long as you learn from your mistake and try not to repeat it again, right? And I think that's really the culture of entrepreneurship.
Yes, sir.
I was a spin-off technology guy for aerospace for years and years. One of the things that I found effective was to make it important to the leadership of the company, working with the board, to incentivize the leadership of the company to have that work, to actually make money from licensing patents and research firms. And so those people that are running the university, the chairs, deans, et cetera, if you could figure out a way to build in their compensation that works, they'll find a way to make it.
Back to the center.
I think let's have one more question or comment, and then back to the posters.
I just wanted, and we were talking about that slide about failure and success, and I was talking to Steve, a member of the community that I do business with, whatever, but he says you can have a revolution. A lot of this depends on the people, the consumer. Some of these products, people will accept an evolutionary product that seems to naturally flow to where everything's been already. But if you take a couple steps ahead of that, you get to a position where you're presenting a revolutionary product, people aren't as willing to accept that, like a revolutionary surgery or something along those lines. I think, I don't want to see it, but I think I should say this, the psychology of the consumer, the individual, however you want to phrase it, is very important to whether your product is going to succeed. Because if you get too far out in front, the product can be great, it can work, bombs away, yay. But you have to also understand that this is capitalism, there are market forces that are going to affect your product that you need to consider before you start throwing money at it and then end up 25 grand in the hole and going by half.
I'd like to take the moment to thank the panel, gentlemen. Thank the audience for being here and enjoy the posters. Very good.
John's talking at 4 o'clock.
Oh.